Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the idea to have this debate on future Wi-Fi and contribution to the EU digital decade. We all know that it is very, very important, and the digital decade, as it was mentioned in European document, Digital Compass, is important for the European development. Networks are crucial, 5G development, and accessibility of high quality networks for Internet of Things development, new medical solutions, and for example, autonomous car real implementation. But on the other hand, the accessibility of good network is important for business, is important for public life, is important for citizens, but especially I think it's important for small, medium enterprises when they are starting to use digital tools, not only to survive as it was very often during the time of COVID, but think about new modernized activity in the future. So accessibility of high quality of Wi-Fi is crucial, and this is the focus and main topic of our today's discussion. At the beginning, I want to give the floor to Ivan Stefanec, member of the European Parliament. He's participating in IMCO and working in IMCO committee, ITRE committee, AIDA, focused on artificial intelligence development, and he's a president of SME Europe of the EPP. Ivan, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Michał, and good morning, everybody. Exactly as Michał Boni introduced, infrastructure is very, very important. In my view, there are three challenges in order to improve all digital topics. First one is really infrastructure, second is digital skills, and thirdly, we have to improve digital legislation. But I'm happy that we focus today on the infrastructure because we have really ambitious targets. For example, in terms of 5G coverage, we are on 14% coverage. We would like to have 100% in 10 years to cover all populated areas. And we have to say that we are in the middle of digital revolution, and it means that technologies are developing faster than ever. So there are more than 100 active mobile broadband as SIM cards per 100 people in the European Union already now, and the penetration rate more than doubled over the last 7 years. And of course, there is a growing number of households and companies which rely only on mobile internet. We are in a global rally on technological development. However, EU is sometimes struggling in achieving leader position. So from the perspective of SMEs, the situation is quite alarming because last year, European Parliament adopted opinion, a new strategy for European SMEs, on which I worked as well. And we recognize that digital technologies, including Wi-Fi, as one of the key elements for securing sustainable growth for SMEs. We have quite ambitious digital compass targets, like 75% of European enterprises should take cloud computing services, big data, and artificial intelligence, and more than 90% of SMEs should reach at least basic level of digital intensity. So we would like to achieve it in 10 years. It should be supported also by financial tools. I'm happy that current facility, not only Connecting Europe facility, but also recovery and resilience facility will support to finance infrastructure. And I hope that member states will use these tools also in order to improve current situation. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Ivan. I think what you have said, it's very important. We need to focus, of course, on digital skills, on legislation, but infrastructure is a basis. Yes, so we need to discuss how to ensure accessibility to high quality networks, and on the other hand, how to create the new model of the functioning and using Wi-Fi, because it's important for public areas. It's also important for some hubs and environments of small, medium enterprises. And of course, there are clear goals and objectives. On the other hand, we have these sources to finance those undertakings and projects. But first of all, I think we need to discuss how important Wi-Fi is as a contribution to European Union digital decade. We are starting with Klaus Hetting, Chairman and CEO of Wi-Fi Now. Klaus, the screen is yours, please.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. And first of all, it's really, really good to be here. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me, Mr. Stefanik and so on. And as Michael said, my name is Klaus Hetting. I'm the CEO and Chairman of an organization called Wi-Fi Now. And Wi-Fi Now, if you don't know who we are, which I imagine most of you probably don't, we are an advocacy and promotional organization, privately owned, working with and for the Wi-Fi industry. So we have been around for something like 6 years now. And our mission is to make sure that the world knows about Wi-Fi technology, new business opportunities in Wi-Fi, innovation, how Wi-Fi impacts the world and the world that we live in, and so on. So, and we're super fortunate to be part of, I believe, one of the most thriving sectors in tech in general. There's a huge amount of activity right now in the Wi-Fi industry. I'm going to talk about that a little bit now. By the way, we're based in Denmark. We're not based in the US, although I do speak sort of American or North American English because I used to live there, and we have a ton of clients, of course, in North America. But I want to touch on a few points, and I'm going to warn you, I'm going to be relatively provocative. So, and please disagree with me as you wish. But let me go straight ahead and start this debate. So the way that I see the world is that we are in fact facing what I like to call a paradigm shift in wireless, all right? And I don't think I'm hyping anything up here, to be honest with you, because I'm going to explain to you what I mean. So the shift happened in April last year when the FCC, the USA, decided to allocate the full 6 gigahertz band to Wi-Fi or to unlicensed use for the US. And that is something, the scale of which we have never seen before in this industry, which goes back, the Wi-Fi industry goes back something like 20 years. So the consequence of that is that for certain parts of the world, starting with the US, but now it's also expanded, of course, we will have 3 times the amount of spectrum available for Wi-Fi under certain conditions and so forth, and the outdoor piece is still being worked on and so on. But this is really a fundamental change. It's not an incremental change in my view. It's a fundamental change in how wireless Wi-Fi specifically is going to work, is going to impact our society for the next couple of years. Now, this is is not instantaneous. It's going to happen over the next couple of years, right? But 1.2 gigahertz of spectrum for the full 6 gigahertz band is a fundamental change. Now, the reverse side of that coin, unfortunately, you could say is, as I see it right now, as a European especially, super concerned because there's going to be a digital divide, all right? At least for the time being. And that digital divide is not going to be between rich and poor. It's going to be between the countries that have allocated the entire 6 gigahertz spectrum and those that have not, countries and regions. I can tell you right now that even for folks like myself who are deep inside the Wi-Fi industry, and I spend most of my time speaking to technologists in our space, leading companies and so on, we don't even exactly have the foresight to understand what this massive increase in spectrum is going to do, right? It's a little bit similar to 20 or 25 years ago when the first move towards unlicensed bands happened. Some people thought this is great. They were visionary. They released the band. They did not know we would be in this spot 20 years later, where Wi-Fi is really the most successful, I would say, and used technology in the world as far as wireless is concerned. So we're in the similar situation. There's tremendous foresight in the full 6 gigahertz band decision, in my view. And now we can then use, and I know lots of folks all over the world are now using their imaginations to innovate. What are we going to do with this massive block of spectrum we've now been given? I can promise you there will be huge development. And I can get more into this digital divide, the paradigm shift story, because there's some technical components. We can discuss those later. Basically, the digital divide is this. In countries that have allocated the 6 gigahertz, the full 6 gigahertz band, they're going to have, in a couple of years, it gets a little bit technical here, 7 160 megahertz channels to choose from. They're all going to be permitted, allowed. They're going to be running at every SME, in every home. We're going to have digital wireless backbones flowing through offices and so on. And that is a major deal. In Europe, we're going to have 1, all right? So they're going to have 7. We're going to have 1 of these channels to work with as it stands at the moment. Of course, this can change, and I'm advocating, of course, for the change, right? This is not a small thing. And again, we can look at applications. We can look at how the cloud is going to come majorly into play. We can look at how SMEs are going to cope with this. But there's going to be a huge difference between what these countries can do and what we in Europe can do. It's not too late to catch up. That's not what I'm saying. But right now, as it stands, there is this digital divide. And I think it's very important that we understand that. So this is going to apply to SMEs, healthcare, schools, not least industry, right? So in the Americas, they're going to have 7 160 gigahertz bands for industry, untouched, pristine, sharing Wi-Fi 6, 7, 6E7 bands. In Europe, we're going to have 1. I really need everyone to understand that, because I think it's an important point, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Okay, so I also just want to say a couple more points. The workhorse of the digital economy is Wi-Fi. If you look at it from a number of devices point of view, if you look at it from total traffic point of view, the Wi-Fi numbers dwarf the mobile industry in that sense, in terms of traffic. So SMEs, once you're inside the environment of enterprise, inside a home, everything becomes Wi-Fi. I'm not saying you never pick up your phone on a cellular call, but the number one carrier, the infrastructure that you use for nearly everything indoors, right, is Wi-Fi. This is a very, very important point. And we also have to remember that when we're talking about wireless traffic, nearly all of it actually happens indoors. Now, I'm not against the mobile industry. The mobile industry is great. We wish them well. We want them to be successful. But the brunt of the digital economy is run on Wi-Fi, not on mobile. There's a certain dichotomy, because if you look at the economic surplus value of Wi-Fi, it's in the trillions, because we provide tremendous amount of value, but the market value of Wi-Fi as an industry is maybe in the, I don't know, hundreds of billions, right? So there's a huge difference in the amount of value we provide as to how much the industry actually generates in terms of market value. The mobile industry is several trillions on a global scale, right, of dollars. Everything that they do is in market value, higher value. But I want to point out that because licenses are, it's unlicensed technology in Wi-Fi, and we've traditionally provided very low cost infrastructure, then it's a little bit skewed, right? So in terms of quote unquote, who's the biggest? So the mobile industry by far the biggest, but I have to say that, and you know, if you look at the surplus value that the Wi-Fi industry creates and the amount of useful contributions that we make to the world, it's equal and it's massive, and I would say in some ways say more. So I'm here to advocate for people taking very, very seriously the need for unlicensed bands, not just the lower half, which we've allocated in Europe, and this is now decided, but the full 1.2 gigahertz. And I want to say, maybe as the last couple of things, regarding spectrum allocation specifically, 5G signals, a little bit technical, so 5G signals, especially if something were to happen, for example, the 6 gigahertz band with 5G, number one, it will not penetrate, excuse me, to the indoors. You cannot beam it, well, you can, but you won't get much of a signal. We already have this issue with 3.5 gigahertz. Indoor coverage coming from the outside in these higher mid-range bands works extremely poorly. You need something that is natively designed for indoors, and this is why Wi-Fi is so much of a better idea in this case. Other thing is sharing. All right, so the fundamental tenet, if you want, of Wi-Fi is it's unlicensed band, but is also sharing capable, right? So the whole 6 gigahertz story that is now unfolding, to some extent in Europe, yes. I mean, some of it is here already, but the whole 6 gigahertz story, which is now especially unfolding in America and the Latin America region, but also in places like, by the way, I should say, Middle East has embraced a lot of this, and parts of Asia and so on. So this is a growing movement for the full 6 gigahertz band, right? And so the sharing concept allows whomever is already in the band, because this is not empty, 6 gigahertz is being used for a number of things. Wi-Fi is the technology that will allow you to introduce tremendous surplus value for SMEs, for everyone, in 6 gigahertz without having anybody need to move out of the band or be disrupted in any way. We now know this. It's the sharing concept, right? It's proven, it works. We know it and we've studied it. In fact, I just yesterday received, this is maybe a little bit off topic, but I just yesterday received a report for the Indian subcontinent. So now in India, there's ample evidence that sharing in 6 gigahertz with Wi-Fi will work, and you don't need to move any incumbents out of the band. This is the latest report that I just received yesterday. So there's stuff going on all over the world for the full 6 gigahertz band that we need to pay attention to, right? And you please challenge me on these points if you will, but I hope that serves at least as an introduction on what I think are the most important points. Applies to SMEs, of course, but it applies generally to the digital economy in Europe. So with that, I hand it back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Klaus, for this fruitful intervention. I think, and I agree with you that we need to consider what kind of limits we have in the European Union, in our countries. Mm-hmm. And you have mentioned this problem of digital divide, not in the traditional model of understanding, rich, poor, urban, rural, but related to the accessibility of the proper channels and the proper giga model. Yes, so I think it's important. And as you have mentioned and then expressed very strongly, Wi-Fi as a special added value, which is important. Mm-hmm. Yes, the surplus of value which can Wi-Fi bring to all of us as users, as workers, and also for small businesses, because we need to understand, you have mentioned this problem of how to design for indoors, yes, accessibility of Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. And it is important in the time in which we are starting the hybrid enterprises, yes, the hybrid working models, schemes, and so on and so on. So it's a real challenge. Now we can continue our discussion. So I want to give the floor to Aureli Bladoja Coelho, Director Communications and Public Affairs of FTTH Council. Please, Aurelia.
Thank you very much, Michal, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share a few words and to share the view of the Fiber to the Home Council Europe. Maybe just a few words about the council for those who don't know us, with the next slide, please. So we are an industry association which was founded in 2004. Our mission is to advance ubiquitous full fiber-based connectivity to the whole of Europe. We have approximately 150 members, vendors, telecom operators, manufacturers, investors as well. And so we have expertise in the entire value chain of fiber. Next slide, please. So I'm here to give you kind of a different perspective to Wi-Fi, because I have been asked to talk about fiber as the underlying infrastructure for the Wi-Fi. So this is the foundation, in our view, of our digital economy, because it is the enabler of a plethora of new technologies and services. With the COVID crisis, it became very clear that there was a need for resilient, high-speed telecommunication infrastructure, which was robust enough to take care of all the data which were going through the networks. So I would like first to give you a snapshot of the state of fiber in Europe. Then I will touch upon some policy consideration. And finally, I will discuss briefly the challenges ahead. The next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of the state of fiber in Europe. We are talking here about coverage, which is the home passed divided by the number of households. And what is the most interesting is the second orange line that you see. This is the ranking of EU 27 plus the UK, and we are currently at 43.8% coverage. So we are almost halfway to full fiber. We see that currently there are 183 million home passed with full fiber, and our forecast shows that by 2026 we should reach 302 million home passed. So 43.8 is not bad progress. We have a lot of progress, and we are progressing rapidly in terms of a fiber deployment. But of course, there is still a long way to go to reach the 100% full fiber coverage. And this will be done with some policy consideration. If we can go to the next slide, please. Policy consideration. So from a policy and regulation perspective, the context is quite favorable. We now have the European Electronic Communication Code on the table. There is an additional investment objective alongside the three objective of competition, creation of the internal market, and consumer welfare. And this really added regulatory certainty to the investors for fiber. So that's a very positive element in our view. We also have, and it was mentioned by Michal, the path to the digital decades. We have very, very clear targets now for 2030. All European households should be covered by a gigabit network, and all populated areas should be covered with 5G. So with the targets, we know where to work to now. There is also the Recovery and Resilience Facility, a very, very important tool. But we should bear in mind that this is about public money, and there are also a lot of private investment coming. As you said, Klaus, there was the telecom sector is really moving at the moment. There are a lot of things happening, and this is very interesting for investors. So there are also a lot of private capitals involved in the deployment of network. Then a few words about 5G. I think it's quite interesting in the perspective of Wi-Fi as well, even if it's not exactly the same thing, obviously. I will not dare to compare the two. But the reason why I want to mention this is because they are always fiber and 5G seen as competitors. And actually, we believe that they are completely they should be seen as friends. They are complementary. you can tell that, well, fiber is really essential to offload the amount of data that is going through the 5G network. So it is really helpful as a backhaul for 5G, but it is also important to bear in mind that savings are possible when you deploy your 5G network, or when you deploy your FTTH, your full fiber network. If you anticipate and build the two at the same time, there are a lot of synergies and cost-saving opportunities possible. The 5G parts of the fiber network would then be less than 5% of the total cost of the network. So there is really a lot of benefits in anticipating and thinking fiber and 5G as a whole in terms of convergence for us. Important also, digital and sustainability. The fiber sector can play a major role in the digitalization and in reaching the objective of the European Green Deal. It is good to know that fiber consumes 17 times less electricity than a copper network, and that the maintenance costs also are up to 60% lower than with alternative technologies such as a copper network. So it limits even more the carbon footprint, and that's why the fiber sector is really eager to contribute to a sustainable digital transition. The next slide, please. So that would be my last slide. I would like to talk about the challenges ahead, and I will not have the time to go through all of them. So just picking up the most relevant, which are in red on the slides. First of all, rural areas. Well, there are currently 2/3 of rural households which are connected with any type of technology. So it could be copper, cable, it could be fiber. But we see that for rural areas, full fiber is really lagging behind. There are only 22% of the households which are covered, compared to 45% for all territories. So there is really something to do, and an effort, a supplementary effort to be made on rural areas. We feel that public funds are absolutely necessary to cover those areas, but we should bear in mind also that that public funds should be targeted only to areas where there is no business case. There are some operators of our members which are, for example, specialized in less dense areas. So sometimes there are some business cases, and it is very important that public funds only goes to the areas which were not covered because of no business case. Also, because this is public money, we believe that to make the most use of this public fund, the technology should really be fiber in the rural areas when it is deployed, because this is the most future-proof technology in our view. About take-up, well, obviously, there is no point to have connectivity if the networks are not used. So we believe that take-up is really the next challenge, and we really call on policymakers to take the necessary measures for end users to benefit from, well, the world of new possibilities that is enabled by full fiber. And finally, I would like to touch upon in-home connectivity, which is, I think, the best transition to the Wi-Fi topic of today, because we see that more and more residences and professional buildings are connected with fiber. And so it gives access to unparalleled bandwidth. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that the end user can fully benefit from the full experience, the full fiber experience. And the reason why is because in-home connectivity and sometimes the Wi-Fi is really the bottleneck. So we see that the question around in-home connectivity is really becoming a strategic issue for most of the service providers. Well, every home, in our view, should get seamless access to the bandwidth provided by fiber operator, because this is the only way that we can have a fully inclusive and digitalized society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurélie, for the clear presentation. Yes, and I think it's important to when we are discussing about new networks, future networks, when we are discussing about 5G, today also about Wi-Fi, it is important to understand how important is connection between 5G and fiber, because very often we are thinking about 5G only in the mobile version. So I think it's crucial what you have raised as a key issue, and the opportunity, I think, and the opportunity related to high quality and this in-home connection. I think it's crucial for Wi-Fi development, which will be very important for many areas, economic and important also for societies. Thank you. I hope that we will have some questions after first interventions. And now I want to give the floor to Benedict Blomeyer, Director of EU Policy, Allied for Startups. So thank you, Aurelia, and now Benedict, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for SME Europe for organizing this discussion on this important topic. A lot of valuable points have been made, so I'm gonna do my best to focus on the startup side here. I represent Allied for Startups. We're a global network of 45 startup organizations representing members like Startup Poland or the Slovak Startup Institute. We come at this from the point of view that an entrepreneur is an idea and a good data set away from building a groundbreaking startup. And this, this in a nutshell is great, but it's a bit more complicated than that. And we also need a digital single market, talent, and infrastructure, as Mr. Stefanec said. And of course, Wi-Fi belongs to this infrastructure. Startups need this backbone to be able to innovate and provide businesses and consumers with the benefits of their new goods and services. And they need low entry barriers to a market. Startups aren't rich, so they need as many connectivity solutions as possible, including strong Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 7 to be competitive. And the more hurdles there are, the less resources they have to invest in building these competitive products. And Aurelie had a map of this ranking up earlier, and you saw Lithuania and Estonia, right up there. And these are also great startup hubs in recent years. I don't think this is necessarily a coincidence, and I think kind of underlines why this discussion is so pertinent. I also think what Aurelie said around making sure that connectivity solutions are aligned or interconnected in that way is something that our members feel quite strongly about. To kick off, maybe I just want to say that the need for strong Wi-Fi manifests itself across our communities. In our members, there are startups pioneering in VR, AR, or IoT digital health solutions, and the digital health devices, which rely, of course, on strong cable-less connectivity. Think about the wearables, but also we should not forget in B2B this is needed. If you think about startups providing sensors in pipelines, just as one example, there's really plenty of examples we can discuss today. We support the uptake and spread of more Wi-Fi technology because it's cost effective and it's allowing a quick and low cost deployment. It is at the end of the broadband connection, but it allows users to enjoy the same broadband connection and reduces the overall cost for citizens and businesses. And along those lines, Wi-Fi in public spaces such as town halls or startup co-working spaces or libraries are of course crucial for achieving the 2030 digital compass targets. Now I wanted to stress one point before handing back. While it is super relevant in urban areas, for public spaces and the likes we mentioned, it is all the more important in rural areas to think about connectivity. It's not just a question about, we care a lot about leveling the playing field for SMEs and startups, but we also want to make sure there's competitiveness from other regions or that is possible. Now, startups may have a pull towards clusters, towards ecosystems, but actually in the last 2 years under COVID, we've seen this this change a bit. Folks have been pulled a bit out of the cities. Now startups can be founded in rural Slovakia or in in the countryside of Spain, and and this is great because oftentimes we would tend to lose folks on the countrysides a bit if all the economic value chain is located in a city. So Wi-Fi is of course an invaluable part of this discussion to make sure we have this. Wi-Fi 6E and 7 are of course have a strong performance improvements. There's higher capacity, lower latency, gigabit speeds. So this is there's a lot to gain here. We of course are also very closely following the discussion about that Klaus was mentioning around the 6 GHz band allocation. Very curious to learn more in the scope of this conversation. And yeah, available of course if you have any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for your contribution to the discussion. I think it's important to understand how important for startups and small businesses accessibility of high quality network and very often Wi-Fi is. When we are discussing today about the new model of city, 15-minute city with support for local solutions and the presence of small businesses in local environment, but in the city, in urban area. So I think it's important to have Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi and accessibility to this Wi-Fi for all businesses, yes, because it's added value for the development of the society. And I think we need to consider how to ensure the accessibility of Wi-Fi and high quality network to startups. And we will continue our discussion. And now, last but not least, in our list of interventions, Paolo Valente, tech policy expert, European Digital SME Alliance. Paolo, the screen is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I would like to first thank SME Europe for organizing this event and for inviting us to participate. As I was hearing the words of at the beginning from Ivan Stefanec, it was very clear that infrastructure, digital skills, and digital legislation are three pillars that we need to look at very carefully. My hope is that today's discussion can be a good source of insights for future-proof digital legislation, which you have important ways of contributing to it also. So as you know, the European Digital SME Alliance is the largest network of ICT small and medium enterprises in Europe, representing more than 45,000 enterprises in total. So spectrum is a critical asset, and for many businesses and SMEs, we are a natural key stakeholder. As we all know, and we all suffered from this, we are all on the same boat. During the last 2 years, we have seen a tremendous test to the resilience of the European economy. For example, to put in place new methods like working from home, it has shown us that excellent connectivity is one of the most important tools that SMEs and business in general need to succeed and to survive. And that is why the European Digital SME Alliance announced in 2009 a manifesto for Europe's digital future. Not surprisingly, connectivity is one of the 10 priorities that we recommend that policymakers must pay full attention. Therefore, European SMEs, as I mentioned before, have a particular interest on the debate that we are having here today. First, because we believe that technology neutrality and policy making are intertwined, and that will be the only way to achieve the 2030 goals detailed on the path to the digital decade. One of our main objectives is that all European digital SMEs can benefit from an inclusive ecosystem that enables all gigabit technologies. That is why we believe that Wi-Fi is one key element of this toolbox that SMEs must have to increase the European digital sovereignty. Secondly, regarding the discussion around spectrum, our vision is very simple. We don't believe in lock-in solutions. We believe that the choices that lay ahead of the European institutions and the member states should focus on protecting our SMEs from having less options than other geographies. The subject of our discussion is the importance of Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7, which operate in the 6 GHz band. Klaus has already mentioned how the dynamics are playing, but in geostrategic terms, we are already having the following situation. If on one hand, we have some geographies like the US, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, and other countries, which represent roughly 70% of the American continent, they have already decided to release the full band for unlicensed or license exempt use. And that means 1.2 gigahertz in total. The European Union and its member states have released so far only 480 megahertz on the same frequency band. It's much less than the half of it. So this policy decision surprisingly reduces business options for European SMEs. And how does that impact SMEs? We should not forget that SMEs and European SMEs are both users and industry providers of technology. So from the user perspective, it's easy to understand. Only the best possible connectivity can be acceptable, and for our members to have, let's say, the same and not less options than their competitors from other geographies, we need to be very, very active on this. One good example is that with the present situation, American SMEs will have services which have more than the double of the resources available in Europe. And if we are talking about performance, the math is very simple. European SMEs potential will be necessarily hampered. But SMEs also have an interest on Wi-Fi because this technology is essential to develop multiple business opportunities. It is critical for the European technology manufacturers that develop products which use Wi-Fi or their products are based on Wi-Fi. I can give you an example that is very easy to understand. We follow very closely amongst many other innovative European SMEs. We have one of the companies that belong to our members that developed a cloud-based network management software. So this software makes the deployment, configuration, and remote monitoring of Wi-Fi networks, it's effortless. And it is based on its own operating system. So it's European developed, it's European based, and it's fully compatible with multi-vendor Wi-Fi access points. And that means openness and inclusiveness, not lock-in. So if SMEs are able to offer innovative and cost-effective solutions, they can also contribute seriously to solve societal problems, like offering affordable Wi-Fi in schools. So this is one of the key markets of the SME that I just mentioned. So what we are discussing here today is how we will support these many innovative companies, which need to compete globally. We are not just in a small geography. We are competing with other organizations from other geographies. So in conclusion, we believe the recipe is very simple. You should expand the spectrum available for Wi-Fi, which together with legislation that prevents lock-in by device manufacturers, will boost the European innovative ICT companies, especially SMEs, whose technology solutions are essential for Europe's digital sovereignty. And thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it was very clear, but on the other hand, I think it was very important what you have said about comparison between the situation of SMEs in United States and the European Union, because it shows that we are lagging behind at that area. Very often we are saying all over the world that European SMEs are our special competitive advantage. But if we want to have SMEs as a competitive advantage in the European Union, of course, we need to support them, and as you have mentioned very strongly and expressed very strongly, expand spectrum for Wi-Fi and ensure accessibility of Wi-Fi for SMEs. And we need to remember that that SMEs are very active in many areas, from healthcare to Internet of Things in the future, and to commerce, shopping, delivering, eating, and so on and so on. So it is, I think, very important. So we have had the first presentations and interventions, and the question is how we can overcome some burdens and limits. What is your view? Because you all expressed how important it is to develop Wi-Fi and to give access to SMEs. But what should be done in your opinion? Looking at the legislative area, looking at some financial sources in European Commission and European Union programs, and looking for some promotions, which is also very important, and of course looking on the problem of spectrum in the European Union and how we can share the spectrum. Paolo, could you start?
Of course, thank you. I would start by saying that on one end, we believe in one word, which is coexistence. When we are using, and we are talking specifically about an unlicensed band, what we need is coexistence, is that it is available for all technologies that can operate on this frequency band. We don't want to create any situation that one technology has a superior advantage compared to another. I think the Wi-Fi industry has always been very clear on this. If coexistence is assured, we are all happy, and we are all in the same conditions. And that would be something that could enable the business models to develop and could accelerate this development. That would be my first reaction to your comment.
Thank you very much. And Aurelia, what is your view on that issue?
Well, for me, of course, I would always see that from the infrastructure perspective. So on this, well, what are the burden and the limits? It would be about connectivity and the way to deploy the network. So from a legislation perspective, the Broadband Cost Reduction Directive is coming and is being reviewed for most probably the beginning of next year. And for this, there would be really well, cutting the red tape and the bureaucracy when you want to deploy a network. You don't want to spend half of the time or even more like filling in papers. You really want to deploy and to roll out your network. So that would be an important point. And the licenses, the permits as well would be something to deal with. That would be in a nutshell.
Thank you. And Benedict, what is your view?
I honestly can only underline what Paolo said very eloquently there. I think the point of coexistence and having broad availability of potential connectivity solutions, I think SMEs and startups probably see eye to eye on that.
Yeah. Okay. And Klaus.
Yeah. So
yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Paolo. Great summary there, and I couldn't agree with you more. So what we're really talking about, I want to reiterate that I think it is clear as far as unlicensed mid-band allocation is concerned, Europe is behind. We have to face this as a fact. And there's a new digital divide. I really believe there is, and that digital divide is now running along the North Atlantic Ocean. All right. This is what we're facing. And in my view, something has to be done. About the coexistence point, this is a very, very important point. We have now proof that coexistence of Wi-Fi and other use of radio spectrum is possible, right? We know this without a doubt. I mean, there cannot be any question about this. This is happening in other countries. As I said, there was just another study where India commissioned by I think an organization in India that shows this is possible in India as well. But it is possible. There's no question about it. So what we're now looking at is a situation where some parts of the world have caught on to this fact. Now, if we think in Europe that 5G will somehow compensate for what we don't have in unlicensed bands by doing something else, this I think is a falsehood. This I think it will not happen. 5G might be do something in those bands, but it will not do what Wi-Fi is capable of doing at very low cost and very high performance. Okay, so I think this to me is very clear. I mean, you can challenge me, and 5G people are happy. I'm happy to speak to for them to challenge me. But to me, this is very clear. The other thing I wanted to say is Aurélie is very right that fiber and 5G goes together beautifully, and I have no dispute about that. I also believe that fiber is the foundation of any strong Wi-Fi service network and so forth. And this is super, super important, because without gigabits running into a building or an enterprise and so forth, then we will not have a great Wi-Fi service to the end user, right? So this is super, super important. They go hand in hand, and you will see that everywhere. I mean, everyone, also on the infrastructure side that work with infrastructure every day is saying fiber and Wi-Fi needs to go together. So there's no question about that. There's one more thing that I wanted to say that I forget right now, but the coexistence issue is super, super important to understand, basically, right? And I don't know if anybody disagrees with me on this, but as far as I'm concerned, it's established. What we need, I think, now is formally to do this for Europe. So formally through CPT and the usual channels of regulation, to formally establish that, open a work group item, follow the usual procedures as far as regulation is concerned, to formally establish that the same applies for Europe. I have no question that it'll apply for Europe, but of course we have to go through the process. So this is what we need to do, I think, and that process is a study process. There's no reason why it shouldn't happen, because it's not binding in any way. It's a study process to confirm or deny the possibility of sharing. So this is what I think we should do immediately, essentially. And I know it's a CPT issue more than anything, but this should happen very soon. I hope you guys agree, or ladies and gentlemen agree.
I'm asking all our participants, do you want to comment what was said, what Klaus said just 1 minute ago? Aurelia?
Commenting for me will be difficult. You're putting me on the spot, Michael. So that would really be difficult to comment on this and on the coexistence.
But you have expressed in your presentation that there is some kind of important it should be complementary model between 5G, very often indicated as a mobile area, and fiber. How you see how FTTH see it in Europe? How it would be possible in all countries, with cooperation with all operators, to organize, if I can say, to organize this complementary model of using fiber and 5G in the type of mobile. What do you think? What kind of conditions should be ensured?
On this, we have done two studies. One was about greenfield areas, so where we wanted to deploy a fiber network, and the 5G was not there yet. So what to do? And the second one that we have done was about what we call brownfield areas, so when there were already some fiber in the ground, and where we wanted to go to the 5G antenna. And what was very interesting, but it becomes a bit technical in that case, is that it really depends on the spare capacity that you have on your network. So really for us, and I was talking about the broadband cost reduction directive just a bit earlier, what is very important is that we don't dig twice or three times. So it's very, the cost of digging in the street is 80% of the total cost of deploying a network. So what we say is that when you dig, you should have sufficient capacity for passing the fiber and even if it's not yet activated, then you can use it also for what we call fiber to the antenna, to the 5G antenna afterwards. So it's the planning is really is really an important element, and anticipating to the extent that it is possible where the 5G networks will be, so that you can get you can decrease the cost of deployments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's important because we need to remember about costs, yes, and this mixed model, I think, it's crucial for finding this complementary and then complementation of 5G and fiber. But I want to continue and address the question to Benedict. Yes. What is your opinion about participation of startups in some decisions about accessibility of new networks and also Wi-Fi? This is the question, because very often we are discussing about how to develop 5G or ensure the access to Wi-Fi, high quality Wi-Fi, but this is a discussion between some public institutions and operators. What do you think? How to involve startups? Because for startups this is crucial, yes, and they are, if I can say, they are out of the debate how to make it. So, what is your opinion about this issue?
I think you're almost taking away our pitch. No, I think you're absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's super important that we are speaking to the small SMEs or the startups in this process. If we want them to come along on the digital trend, if we want the small business providers to help deliver the green and digital transition that we've been talking about. Now, maybe speaking, kind of adding a sentence from the startup perspective. Entrepreneurs we talk to are super pragmatic, and they're not dogmatic about the type of connectivity, but we all agree we need more and better connectivity. And I think there's an important point, under this, which is that, of course, the technology is changing constantly as well. A better Wi-Fi is maybe around the corner, changing the view here very, very quickly, and demands change a lot. Now, if we happen to work in the B Central Hub at downtown Brussels. This is a startup hub, and in this hub, you will find some, startups who are working in data-intensive industries, who are just very much still kind of using the Ethernet and kind of connectivity solutions and have their computers all set up, and maybe won't be as invested in this discussion. But you have in the same hub folks building IoT devices and digital health, wearables, and for them this is a life or death question that we open up and / improve the Wi-Fi connectivity. Ergo, it's you're not going to have one fixed opinion, but it's important to speak to the whole ecosystems, and I think, of course, our organizations have a role to play. But I also and this is an open question, you're right, thinking about how we can get out there even more. From what we've discussed so far, I mean, I think it would appear to our association as well that expanding the spectrum to full 6 GHz would allow more capabilities and is part of the solution to improving connectivity for our members.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the similar question I want to address to Paolo is how to involve small business organizations to be much more, if I can say, vocal in the discussion about accessibility of Wi-Fi, high quality Wi-Fi, and this process of connecting 5G and fiber and overcome some burdens. The red tape, as Aurelia said very strongly. So, what is your view?
From our side, we always like to stress that we have a dual edge. On one hand, we are users, and I think we are demanding a good connectivity experience like citizens. So businesses also need it very well, but we are also providers of technology. And that's the let's say the arena where we like to discuss our ideas. I will give you one example. When we talk about digital sovereignty, we have a very important topic that is being discussed presently regarding microprocessors, and it's a I would say a medium long term process that will take time to bring this technology to be at least to provide some resilience to Europe on this production. But when we are talking about Wi-Fi, we already have very capable SMEs that work on this field. They are producing, they are inventing new ways of developing services and products. And what they need is predictability. They need this, at least to have the same tools as other regions. And for that, I think there are easier ways of helping with good legislation that allows and enables the spectrum to be available as soon as possible. But also when you talk about the red tape, we don't need, for SMEs, we don't need a very intense regulation. What we need is a regulation that makes the business thrive. That's our vision.
Yeah, thank you. So if I can say about all your views. Firstly, we need to understand what are the connections and how it is complementary 5G and fiber. It is important. Secondly, that we need to have a list of some red types, as Aurelia said. So we need to be much more not so bureaucratic in not in discussions, but in implementation of how accessibility should be ensured. So the question addressed to not only to legislation, it's very often the question addressed to all procedures at the local level very often, which are important for building the new networks. Thirdly, what is important, this is a question of understanding what kind of areas important for SMEs development and startups development should have support from the high quality infrastructure. Fourthly, this is a big discussion about expanding spectrum for Wi-Fi. And probably this discussion should be raised also by BEREC or by European Parliament. Ivan, could you add something from the European Parliament perspective, coming back to this report on SMEs, because I think it's important. We have no connection, so I'm sorry, but I think that it should be presented it should be some kind of our recommendation from today's discussion, yes, addressed to the European Parliament with some kind of question addressed to the Parliament and to the Commission, how to, coming back to the points raised by Klaus, how to ensure that more channels and more spectrum will be addressed to Wi-Fi development. Is it a proper, adequate recommendation? I'm asking you, all of us. It's not clear. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. Could you just summarize that again? Sorry, the recommendation.
So, because you know, we are discussing in the circle of SMEs Europe, yes, mm-hmm. And I think it would be important, for example, from this kind of debate, to have a recommendation addressed to the European Parliament and to the European Commission focused on avoiding and overcoming some red types in accessibility of Wi-Fi, and also announcing that because Wi-Fi is important for the startups and the SMEs development, we need to consider in the European Union how to make this expansion of spectrum and more channels for Wi-Fi accessible, and how to make it. It should be also addressed to BEREC. I'm not sure if it is the proper formula of recommendation, but I'm asking you. Yeah, yes. Klaus?
No, I absolutely agree. I think you're spot on with that recommendation. I mean, one of the nice things, certainly the latter part of it, I mean, one of the great things about Wi-Fi for startups and for SMEs is that is traditionally that you don't need a license to do it, right? So the Wi-Fi industry has been enormously popular among SMEs, right? Whether they're be on the user side or they're actually developing new technology, because the entry into the industry is in fact very low cost. It's generally speaking very hard to get into the mobile industry because the mobile industry needs hundreds of millions of dollars, to do nearly anything. But Wi-Fi can be done at a startup level by practically anyone. So what my point is, it has traditionally been very important to, as a technology, but also as an opportunity for new business. So I think this is super important. I think you're right, but what concerns me, and your statement was right, I think, Michael, but what concerns me very much is that, and I guess this is in part why we're doing this session, is that the Wi-Fi side of things, the unlicensed side of things, because it, as I said in my initial remarks, because it does not, the industry does not represent market value of trillions, then we don't get enough attention, despite the fact, I believe, that we generate trillions of economic surplus value. It's just not something that you can run off to the bank with. So this is the dichotomy of Wi-Fi. It's incredibly important for society, but it's not trillions in printed money, so to speak. So and this is super important. So once you understand that and people accept that, and I think it's clear how much how important Wi-Fi is to everyone, including SMEs, then it should receive more attention. And I think your conclusion or your recommendation is the right one, Michael. I think the European Parliament should take this, what I think is the new digital divide, which is, in my view, completely unnecessary, it very seriously and discuss it very seriously. Look at the facts, look what other nations do, not only, but make a decision for Europe, study it in Europe, so that 2 or 3 years from now, or 10 years from now, we're not, looking frankly like the Stone Ages compared to what they have at universities, schools, education, industry, whatever in America, for example. This, to me as a European, this is not acceptable. So I agree with your statement, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. We have additionally, questions from the audience. Peter Rubik, how can we ensure GDPR for security in infrastructure? Is there a new encryption with advanced blockchain? This is one question. And another question also from Peter Rubik, can we also use some high voltage power cables for high-speed data transmission instead of fiber? So this is a question addressed to you as an expert who wants to answer for those two questions or one question.
I can answer. Please? I can answer quickly to both of them if you want. But
yeah, please.
So as far as encryption and security is concerned, WPA 3 is the latest encryption standard by the Wi-Fi Alliance. It's supported on all Wi-Fi devices that are certified as Wi-Fi devices. And that is a very, very strong telco grade encryption. For security generally, there are various protocols that are used by the Wi-Fi industry for public Wi-Fi and so forth. Even this Wi-Fi for EU program, I believe, has actually begun using these now. So there is telco grade. Blockchain, I don't know. I have to admit, blockchain, I don't know. I'm not aware of it. There are possibly projects in that respect. The second question was about, no, I forget what the second question was about. What was it again? Sorry.
Can we also use some high voltage power cables?
Yeah, sure.
High-speed data transmission. Yeah.
Yeah, this is possible. There's a couple of standards. There's a new one, and I have to, off the top of my head, I forget what it's called. But there are standards that allow transmission inside your home of data on the electrical circuits that you have in power circuits that you have inside your home. And then at the end of, there are modems for that, right? And at the end of each socket, electrical socket, then you can put in a device that is then a modem with a Wi-Fi transceiver in it. So these things exist. They've existed for a long time. There's a new, is it called G.net, I think, but there's a new standard. In fact, there's a German company who's one of the world leaders in this kind of technology. So, and it's a very good way of distributing signals inside your home. It's not as fast as fiber, but it works very well. And you can get Wi-Fi right in your home by distributing the backbone across on your electrical system. This definitely exists, and it is being developed.
Yeah, thank you very much. If somebody from our panelists want to add something, because we are at the finish of our meeting, please.
One point on the second question and about
please.
of course, there are multiple technologies that can be used, and that's very clear. But I think what is we now have to put that in perspective also with the fight against climate change and with the digital sustainability. And we really have to look at the technologies which are able to do both, to give more benefits for the end users in terms of services and application, but also which are able to have an answer to the fight against climate change. And what we see with fiber, and as I said, all the technologies are possible, but if you want to get both the benefits of the new applications that are developed by the SMEs or the App Alliance, or if you want at the same time to get sustainability, then the choice should be fiber. When you look at the energy consumption of fiber, it is far less than all the other technology, and this is the only technology which is future-proof because it doesn't need to be upgraded year after year. So once it is in the ground, then you are fine for 20 years at least. And I think that now, because of the Green Deal, because of all the new issues that we are facing, this is a very important element to bear in mind.
Thank you very much. And the final comment, Benedict, do you want to present something?
Well, I would just say I've learned a lot from esteemed co-panelists. The question on GDPR security infrastructure and encryption with advanced blockchain is one where I certainly am not an expert to answer on. So I thank Klaus for jumping in. Of course, Aurélie underlined the key point again at the end that technologies are changing, our societal demands are changing, and from our side, as long as we are kind of seizing these opportunities, including opening to 6GHz the spectrum, we have a great chance to on the startup side to deliver the green and digital transition that we're all looking for. So I thank SME Europe also for convening our forces here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Paolo, your final comment.
Thank you. I would also like to highlight that Wi-Fi as a technology is very, let's say, eco-friendly. It consumes much less energy than other technologies. And regarding your comment, your idea or suggestion to create some recommendation to the Parliament. I would like also to say that we are more than available to contribute and to work with all the policymakers on this discussion. We can bring you examples, we can bring you suggestions. It's something that we are always very keen to contribute, to have an healthy debate about this topic. And once again, thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. I have that during the discussion, and thanks to your presentations, interventions, we have touched very important topics and points crucial for the debate about the future digital Europe and digital decade in the perspective of 2030. So I think it was raised very strongly how important Wi-Fi is for SMEs and startups, and also for citizens. And the accessibility of high quality Wi-Fi is crucial. But on the other hand, it was raised that we need to strengthen our efforts to have Wi-Fi much more accessible and expand the spectrum for Wi-Fi. Also, we have discussed about some rate types and procedures which are too bureaucratic. It should be also changed. And what is also very important, we touched the problem of cost effectiveness, and I think it's important. So thank you very much for all your contribution and input to the discussion. I think that for SMEs it would be important to continue this debate. For example, thinking about this kind of recommendations addressed to European Parliament and European Commission. So in SMEs, in SME Europe, we can consider this. But now, thank you again. Thank you very much to all of you, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you very much to audience. Thank you very much to Peter Rubik for all your questions and contribution in the chat. Thank you very much.